Hello everyone, this is Ramirez, Tidewater Renaissance Fighting Arts. And today we're going to have a little chat about a video response that I did to Sellsword Arts and their recent video on better protective gear. And I did a rant on this on my Facebook page, and I'm not necessarily proud about everything I said, though I stand by it. But I wanted to clarify it, and so I'm putting this on my actual channel just to discuss what I discussed there, hopefully in a little more civilized context. And as far as that video is concerned, I think that the folks at Sellsword Arts are just simply young, and that's a part of their problem is they don't know the history. And to me, the old guy with the gray in their beard, who's been doing a lot of this for a very long time in a number of different contexts outside of just HEMA, I know a little bit more history. And as far as the argument was, we need better HEMA protective equipment, particularly as far as our heads are concerned and our hands. And bottom line is we've already had the equipment. As a matter of fact, we had equipment so good that people turned away from it. And that's unfortunate because the reason it doesn't exist is because people didn't buy it when it was available, or the few that are available, people don't get. And we first have to go past a trope about HEMA protective equipment. At the end of the day, this is HEMA protective equipment. It is not for Blosfectin. It really what it boils down to is protective equipment in modern day HEMA is just cheap armor. Good armor, bad armor. Very protective, but nowhere near as protective as this is. If you really look at these, they aren't that different. Look at that those fingers there. Look at those fingers there. It's the materials that really make the game change, but also because of that, you see how I have this huge bulb here to protect my knuckles? Here, there's just no way for the swords to get into those gaps, and these fingers go back pretty far as their actual protective quality. It's something you can do with armor that you can't necessarily do with the plastic armor. And that was the bulk of my argument about hand protection, with the exception that, and I'll talk about the past. I think I'm talking a little bit about the future, but this has only come out for a couple of years. This has been out since like the 14th century. We've modernized it. We've made the plates, which used to be very, very thin. We've made them to cover more and more. And on some, not this particular pair, but I've seen gauntlets, metal gauntlets with fully enclosed thumbs. It's not historical. It's used in a modern context. And also I've seen a lot of these gauntlets, because they are generally, this may not be the best example, but they generally have a thinner profile than a lot of the bigger plastic gloves. Now in this case, they're pretty close to being one-to-one, but I have a student in my school who has a titanium gauntlet with a profile so thin, it's his preferred glove to do saber. And if any of you know about doing saber in HEMA, one of the big questions is finding a glove that will fit your HEMA saber. And his titanium gauntlet has comparable protection to a modern plastic HEMA glove, but because you can have that protective quality at such a thin with metal, it actually is one of the better fitting gloves for something like a closed sail guard style saber guard. So the idea that armor has to be like for harness fectin, and yes, I do a lot of harness fectin as well, is not necessarily true, and the technology exists right now to and it's already available on the market, certain gauntlets that are doing a better job than modern plastic HEMA equipment. Now, in fairness, that's a relatively recent introduction, but as Boohurt and things come out that they want more and more protection, a lot of things like gauntlets have been modernized to the point that they are comparable, or if they don't exceed, what is currently available on the HEMA market. They may be a little more expensive. Certainly titanium gauntlets would be more expensive. But in modern thinking, if you wanted more protective gear, it's already out there. The argument against it is, well, it's armor. And I think that's something that we should reasonably discuss. Is this not armor? Is when you have plastic knee caps or elbow protectors. Is or is that not armor? Because really, in my opinion, it's just bad armor. It's just not as protective. It's light armor. It's not that this is protective equipment and this is armor. How we score it in terms of, let's say, HEMA tournaments and things like that is it should be treated as it's not there. And so if you get hit in a gauntlet, should really be no different as you got hit on a HEMA glove. Because at the end of the day, they're both protective equipment, i.e. armor. And I've heard arguments specifically on the comments, because I got in the comments on the Sellsword video, that, well, metal can deform. Well, plastic can crack. And actually that whole deformation thing kind of depends on the metal you're using. Some metals deform. Some metals, like hardened steel, if you hit them hard enough, they crack. Stainless steel will also crack. So it's really no different. It's just that the threshold to do that becomes a lot higher. Now, you could make arguments about the maintenance of steel or metal gauntlets. But once again, that's a materials issue. You're going to have less maintenance with stainless steel or titanium. You're going to have more if it's hardened steel or if it's mild steel. Mild steel is going to have a greater weight to it. Titanium is just going to be a lot more expensive. So there's room to use metal armor in HEMA. And I don't think the boys at Sellsword Arts necessarily have experience. They have one guy they bring in every so often to talk about armor. But I don't know that they know enough about what's out there currently in the market of hand protection to say we need better hand protections. Like, better hand protection actually already exists. The next one, we have to go back in time to get to now. So yes, we have to go back to the future. Great Scott. Fencing gear, fencing masks. So there's a fencing mask for HEMA. The arguments are it really doesn't protect us because of the force and the types of things, particularly longsword. I think some of our lighter weapons probably fine, but there have been a lot of arguments with the force of getting hit, especially now as people experiment with trying to do a Blosfect and pole arms and things like that, that maybe getting hit with a haft or something, especially on the top of the head, there isn't sufficient, this padding is not sufficient to protect us. And once again, you only get one brain. I mean, you get two hands, you get one brain. So protecting it should be important. And we've long since relied on traditional fencing mask design, in other words, this wire mesh, to protect our face, and there is metal structure to the top here, but it's nowhere near and doesn't have the type of head and skull support as, let's say, a medieval helmet to give you that degree of protection as you go into heavier and heavier striking against the head. So let's talk about the front of the face first. This is pierced plate. It's actually, this piece is meant for my 14th century bassinet helmet, and it straps in, there's a little strap and buckle, and you can see this is a lot thicker in construction. It still has holes. The visibility is actually very comparable to a fencing mask. It's just that this is a solid piece of metal that they've drilled a bunch of holes in. And because of that, this is far less likely to dent if pushed by a longsword blade for HEMA than a standard fencing mesh. And since the areas around it, in my case, would be solid steel, it's a helmet, with a suspension liner, which I've talked about. If you've gone into my harness fectin videos about how to pad a helmet, you don't put it, you don't pad a helmet so that it sits on your head. You actually want it to secure on your crown, on the edge, where if you think about wearing a medieval crown, that's where you want it to support. That way, if something hits up here, it doesn't directly transfer the shock to the skull itself. A lot of modern HEMA equipment is not geared to support at the crown. It's kind of floating because of the way the mask is shaped, but sufficient force will transfer directly to the skull, and that's not good. More advanced suspension liners will actually pull towards the crown, and there will be lots of space where if something hits you, if I lift my hat up a little bit, if something hits the hat, it presses down there, that force is distributed around the skull. It's just a better design. So the idea of a fencing helmet with a suspension liner is not new. I mean, you could say, hey, we'd like to have these in HEMA. Well, the thing is, they already exist, and they have existed for many, many, many years. One of the earliest designs by a company no longer in existence called Windrose Armory created their Fiore helmet for Christian Tobler, and they have a picture of the one they made for him in 2010. There are older versions of this design, and the thing about it is, we have that. There's another one that you can look up. You can look up the Windrose Fiore helmet. If you go online, you Google it, you can see pictures of it. But as I said, it's no longer in current production. Arm Street has a similar one now that is in production. But theirs is a little different, but it's the same principle. There's a company called Horsebows. All one word, Horsebows. They created their own fencing helmet, and it's largely all pierced plate. There are other companies, Tradewinds, the Levant, that have made not as heavy a pierced plate, but still a lighter pierced plate design with a Bergenet. And other styles like the Morian, the Spanish helmets, where they've put these pierced plate designs in place. And in theory, you could pad them for suspension liner or just pad the crown, and they would probably work a lot better as head protection. So it's not that the solutions don't exist or haven't existed. We've actually had them a long time. The argument has always been that, well, they're metal, so they're armor. And I've seen rather dumb arguments about that, which is, well, armor only works if you're wearing a full suit of armor, which is BS as far as I'm concerned, because originally a lot of these types of fencing helmets are when HEMA, before it was HEMA, and this is where we're going kind of back a little bit, was Western martial arts. We knew the limitations of fencing masks. They didn't make the heavier HEMA masks we have today. So they wanted something stronger. So especially in groups like the SCA, and I know some people, HEMA, SCA, they don't like it, but they were big into doing Western martial arts. And they started using blades originally when they were way back in the day doing it, when my beard was still black. using fencing type swords, and then they moved on to Schlager blades, and they moved on to heavier rapier style blades, and they knew they needed something better than a regular fencing mask. So one of the things they came out with was fencing helmets. And the Windrose Fiore is an example of a fencing helmet. And they made others that were, as I said, like the Spanish Morion style and the Bourgeois style of helmets with these pierce-placed fronts. And then Horsebows came out with their thing. These helmets already existed, and to some extent they still exist today. The thing is that, like for my friends at Sellsword Arts, they don't know about them. They weren't around long enough. They weren't playing in the SCA in the 90s and 2000s to know that fencing helmets are a thing, and we rarely see them in HEMA tournaments because currently they're not allowed. We look at metal helmets and say, well, this is a helmet. It's not the same. My argument is these aren't necessarily completely historical helmets because they have pierced plate and other things on them. They are protective gear. They're metal protective gear. But at the end of the day, they're meant because you can't go into a HEMA tournament or any type of fighting without your head being properly protected. So we have to kind of, one, get past the idea that if it's a metal helmet or metal gauntlets, that it is exclusively armor and treated as protective gear. Just that we have good protective gear and we have not so good protective gear. If we start thinking of it that way, we can start improving the quality of what we do in HEMA as far as protecting ourselves from potential heavy blows, from concussive forces, because once again, as far as force is mass times acceleration. The heavier the helmet is, the more mass it has, the less acceleration. Less mass times acceleration equals force. You want to reduce the force, you do have to increase the mass of the item. And for helmets in particular, that's important. Not only for just the physical protective qualities. Would we need to change some things about how we inspect armor, how we inspect safety equipment? Probably, but you wouldn't have to be looking for like grabbing this and squeezing it to determine if the mesh is still good. You'd literally be able to see huge dents if you had a mask like this, and it would be very hard to do said denting. So once again, there's a lot of advantages to looking to our past to see our future. If we want better protective equipment, it's already out there. And in some ways, we can just look to our current day. We got to think outside the box. Rather than someone else designing yet another piece of plastic, maybe we need to look at what's already out there in titanium in the armored fighting market. Because really, as far as design, they're not that different. You know why? Because hands aren't really all that different. As long as we all have 5 fingers on each hand, aside from the 6-fingered man, we're good. The 6-fingered man will just have to order custom and hopefully not kill the maker. But other than that, we have stuff that will do the job that Sellsword Arts was asking, what is the future? The future is now and in the past. So that's it for this video. I'm Ramirez with Tidewater Renaissance Fighting Arts, and I will see you in the next video.